his company wants to give you a lot of satisfaction from being on their cloud. And that is Jamey Jeff, who's the head of investments, Amazon Web Services. So, Jamey.
Well, thank you, Alan. Thank you to the club. It's a privilege and an honor to be up here, certainly amongst all of the other honorees. Proud to be able to share a stage with you all. Alan, thank you for a wonderful evening and for all that you and the club do for alumni and the broader business community around the DC area. In my role at Amazon Web Services, I lead a variety of funding programs that help early stage startups start building their products and businesses on the Amazon Web Services cloud. Our flagship program, AWS Activate, is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year, and we reached a couple other major milestones. Since its launch, we have offered or provided over $6 billion in AWS promotional credits to help over 280,000 startups around the globe get their start. And every day I'm honored and amazed and frankly just humbled at the opportunity and the privilege to be able to see from a bird's eye view the level of innovation and impact that these startups have in terms of entrepreneurship and job creation and in many cases altering society for the better. I want to share a little story. A number of years ago, I was taking the train back from New York. It was late at night, and I stumbled upon a TED Talk by a gentleman named Benjamin Zander. And he's the conductor of the Boston Philharmonic Orchestra. Some of you may be familiar with his talk or of his work. And I was by myself. It was one of the late trains, so it was dark, and I got pretty engrossed in this TED Talk. And the topic of it was he was trying to encourage people to appreciate classical music, and he shared a stat that something like only 3% of the population considers themselves to be classical music lovers. And so he starts off his talk, and he's sitting at a piano, and he explains that he's going to kind of break down how to understand classical music. And he begins to play a piece, I believe it was by Chopin, and he starts off and plays it very simply, the way that maybe a fifth grader learning to play the piano would play it. So he plays it one note at a time. It's the very basics of the melody. And he explains that one of the creative elements that good composers follow is they will tease the ear with the melody, because your ear, as you listening for music, knows to listen for notes that are on key. And so the way they'll tease the ear is as they go through the song, they might tease along, and you're waiting to hear that one note at the end, and they'll play a note that's a little bit sharp or a little bit flat. And it creates this tension as you're listening, and that kind of pulls you into the song. And so he's doing this, and he's kind of going through and playing a little bit more of the melody, and he's making it more sophisticated, moving from a fifth grade level up to a level that he plays at. And so it reaches a climax where he says, okay, I'm not gonna play it the entire melody from start to finish. And I want you to listen for when I hit the end, I'm gonna actually hit the on-key note that your ear has been waiting to hear. And so as you're listening to this, I want you to hear how I tease it sharp and flat as we go along. And then when that relief that you get when I finally hit that note that you've been listening for. But he says, when I do it this time, I want you to think about someone in your life who you have loved and lost. And so he sits and he pauses for a moment, and then he plays this melody, and he hits that final note. And if you can all imagine what this sounds and feels like, this final note just hangs in the air. And this is the big stage at a TED Talk, so room probably 20 times the size of this one. And this final note just kind of reverberates. And the camera's panned from him, he's sitting at this grand piano, out into the room. And there's not a dry eye in the audience. Every single person in the room is crying. One additional person, a guy on a train on a late night back from New York, is also crying as he's watching this video of this TED Talk. And so he concludes his presentation and says, I describe this presentation as my objective being to get more people to enjoy classical music. And he said, for a long time, I thought that was my mission. He said, I've really come to realize that my real mission is to awaken possibility in people. And my measure of, he's saying this, not me yet, of how he measured his success in life was how many shining eyes there were around him. And a measure of a good life is how many of those shining eyes are part of each of one of your lives. So I want to take a moment and just honor the shining eyes that joined me here tonight, because you're all special in very different ways to me, and I'm grateful that you're here at my table. I'm going to start with Valerie and Kevin. Valerie and Kevin, we started as coworkers and business partners 25 years ago, which is hard to imagine and will make us all feel old. That professional relationship has evolved into a lifelong personal and friendship. And I'm so glad for you guys to be here tonight, here with me. Personally appreciative also of all of the help that you gave me as I was navigating the path to joining AWS and getting my sea legs under me after I started with the company. So thank you both. Sue Kim is another one of my AWS colleagues. Sue joined my team a little bit over a year ago. And within a couple weeks, I quickly recognized that Sue was one of the best hires that I've ever made throughout my career. Now, I will share one detail about Sue, and I ask you, if you see her after the fact, to offer her some support. Sue earned her MBA from Northwestern. And when I was inviting her to come here, it's a very fine school, of course. When I was inviting her to come here, her first response was a groan. And she said, do I have to spend the night with a bunch of Wharton alums? And I say, yes, Sue, you do. But then I mentioned that Kevin, who works closely with us, would be here, and her mood picked up. So Kevin, thank you for helping Sue with this very difficult moment in her life. Yes, please. The next group of folks I want to thank, Scott and John and Sarah, are three of my classmates from Wharton. They're part of our original study group that we were assigned. We spent many weekends. We were part of the Wharton MBA for executives, and so we spent many weekends back and forth between DC and Philly on the train. We got to know the Acela routes very well. We got to know the food on the Acelas very well. I don't recommend it. The hot dogs are passable if you're in a pinch. But the three of you really were such an instrumental part in making that experience such a rewarding one. And it's a true pleasure to have you guys here tonight, and also to get any time where we are together without books in our hands, even though Scott mostly didn't have books in his hands when we were in school, so it doesn't really feel much different for him, but John and Sarah understand what I'm talking about. Lastly, and most importantly, I want to thank my family. Heather, my wife, and my two kids, Rain and Hayden. When I started my studies at Wharton, being in the executive program, I had a very demanding full-time job. And Rain, my oldest, was 6 months old. Rain is now learning to drive, and so that was a good 15 years ago. Hayden was born with 2 months to go before graduation. And so it probably goes without saying, but I would say it, but Heather carried a tremendous load during that period to support my goals and ambitions, and just the literal ability to kind of make it through those 2 years, which somebody wisely described would be both the longest and shortest 2 years of my life. Thank you. Several years later, here I am with a job that is arguably even more demanding than that job was at the time. And I am grateful for Heather, your, and Rain, and Hayden's continued support, especially the many times when you roll your eyes and I say, hey, sorry, I've got to talk to somebody in Singapore tonight, so I've got to leave dinner early. I would not be where I am or who I am without the three of you. Thank you all. I appreciate it, and I love you.